Okay, so we are now on page 34. And if you remember, Odysseus has just been begged by the prophet Laodes. Laodes has been asking Odysseus to spare him, and Odysseus has decided not to, because he thinks that the fact that Laodes was staying in the halls with the suitors shows that he must have been on the suitors' side. So he basically has just told Laodes that he is not going to let him live. And just after this speech, we get this hos araphonesas. Now, ara here is one of those little particles that you don't need to translate. Hos means thus or so, and phonesas means having spoken. And it's related to, or you could say speaking or saying. It's the aorist participle. And the verb is related to the noun phoner, meaning a voice. And obviously the English telephone. Okay, so saying, he heileto, he seized. Right, this is from the verb haireo, to take something. He seized with his keiri pakeia. Now this is a dative phrase because it's a dative of instrument, which in Latin would use the ablative case, but in Greek it's the dative case. So it means with his strong hand, pakeia meaning strong, and keiri meaning a hand. So he seized with his strong hand a sword, xiphos, and the sword is described by the participle kaimenon, which means lying. The verb kaimai means I lie in the sense of lie down somewhere. So xiphos kaimenon, a sword lying there, or lying nearby, you could say, which, ho, okay, and this is the neuter of the relative pronoun hos, and it's neuter because it's referring back to the neuter noun xiphos, meaning a sword, okay? So the sword which, and then this word ra here is another particle that we can ignore really. So a sword which agelaos, had apoproerke, rather long, complicated word, apoproerke, which means had dropped, basically, had let fall. Kamazde. Now, kamazde means to the ground, right? Remember that in Greek, the ending zde or se usually indicates movement towards a place. So, for example, hai athenai, let me type in an example for you here. Hai athenai, feminine plural, is the noun that means Athens, the city of Athens. And if you were to say Athenazde with a Z-E or Z-E on the end, or zeta epsilon at the end, that would mean to Athens. Okay, to Athens, like I'm going Athenazde, to Athens. And this is the same thing here, kamazde, to the ground. Okay. And then you have this participle kteinommenos. Okay, this is from the verb kteno, to kill, which means the same as apokteno. And this is a passive participle from that verb. So it means being killed. In other words, this is the sword that Agelaus had dropped as he was being killed. That's the point. And then we get to here, which is dative, and you can tell that it's dative because of the iota subscript there. So to means with it or with this, dative of instrument, and it's still referring to the sword. Okay, so with this, he struck elasse. Right, this is from the verb elauno, which means to drive something like a chariot, but it can also mean to hit someone, like tupto. Okay, so he struck him, the object is ton. Okay, he struck him, kata, that is the preposition that tells us where he struck him. He struck him in his aukena, right? Auken means a neck, and meson means middle. So he struck him in the middle of his neck. And the subject of Elasse is still Odysseus. We're still talking about Odysseus, even though we haven't seen his name on this page. And the object ton refers to that prophet, Laodes. Okay. And then in line 329, we have the particle de here, which means and. And then ara is another particle that we don't really have to translate. And the same is also true of ge here. But what we do need to translate is this genitive absolute, phthengomenu tu. Okay, now it's a genitive absolute, so tu means him, referring to Laodes, and phthengomenu is a participle that means speaking. So literally with him speaking, in other words, while he was still speaking, his head, kare, which means the same as kras, okay, his head, like caput in Latin, his head was mixed or mingled, emikfer, aorist passive, was mingled with the dust, koniersin, which is the dative case. So, you know, he hadn't even finished speaking when Odysseus, struck him in the middle of the neck with a sword. And, you know, his head, you know, he fell over, presumably, and, you know, his head gets all mixed up with the dust on the floor. Okay. And then in line 330, we have, again, the particle de, which I translated as now, you know, because we're in a new scene, or rather we're moving on from Laodes to someone else. And the new character that we're looking at is Terpiades. Now, Terpiades is a name, sort of, but it's what we call a patronymic. Because it's naming this person. The real name is Phemius, but it's naming him after his father, Terpes. Okay? So, the son of Terpes, Terpiades, the singer, Aoidos, right? Aoidos means a singer. So, Phemius, the son of Terpes, Phemius is a singer. Okay, he was still, right, eti means still, he was still aluskana, he was still avoiding, and the object is kera melainan. Okay, now the adjective melas means dark, which we discussed in class. This adjective gives us in English words like melanin and melatonin and things like that. And the noun is kera. Now, care can mean fate or something. You could also translate as death, right? Various meanings. So he was still avoiding dark death. And then at the beginning of line 331, we get this man's actual name, Phemius, who, Hos, used to sing Eide, imperfect tense, who used to sing, and again, I'm not translating ra here, who used to sing meta menestersin, that means with the suitors or among the suitors. You know, he was their singer, he was their entertainer, so he used to sing among the suitors by force, ananker. Right, the noun ananker means sort of necessity or compulsion. It's also related to the verb anankasdo, okay, the verb which I'll also write in here. So the verb in Greek, quite a common verb, anankasdo, means I force or compel someone to do something. And this is the noun, and it's in the dative case because, again, it's a dative of instrument, right? It means by necessity or through necessity or by compulsion, something like that. Okay. And then let's go on here. So now page 36. And so we're now hearing about Phemius, okay? So he stood, Esther, and you could translate der if you want to, as and, you could say and he stood. I don't think that makes great sense in English, so I left it out. I ignored it in my translation. He stood. And then the next word I would probably translate is ekon, right? Present participle from echo, which means I have or I hold. Okay, so he stood holding en keiresin in his hands, en plus dative, the forminga ligean, that's the object. Okay, now forminx is a noun meaning a lyre, which is a type of musical instrument, L-Y-R-E. And the adjective ligean means something like clear toned, you know, clear sounding. So holding in his hands the clear-toned lyre, because he's a singer, right? And he stood anki par orsothuren, right? He stood nearby, anki meaning near, and para means by somewhere, para plus accusative. And now a thura, or thure, is a door, and orsothure is a back door. Right, so he was standing near the back door. And so he's trying to sort of stand out of the way. And as we'll see, he is trying to decide what to do. Okay, and so Homer then tells us, mermerisden. Now that means he was thinking, he was considering, he was pondering. Dicha fresi. Now, dicha means divided. You know, unsure, something like that, split in two, in his mind. So fresi is dative, is a dative case, sort of literally divided in his wits, divided in his thoughts, divided in his mind. And I didn't translate der here. So he was pondering, divided in his mind, whether, that's air, whether having gone from the hall, ekdus megaroia, so ekdus meaning having gone, or having gone out, and it takes genitive because motion away normally takes genitive, right? Apo plus genitive, ex plus genitive, etc., just like the ablative in Latin. So having gone out from the hall, so megaroia, genitive singular, right? Whether he should sit his deuter. And this is in a mood called the optative because this is because it's sort of uncertainty, rather like the subjunctive. You know, it's not that he's doing this, he's wondering whether he should do it. So that's why we don't have the indicative here. So he was wondering whether he should sit by, so here we have poti. Now poti in Homer is like pros in later Greek. So sit, and it takes accusative. So whether he should sit by the bomon tetugmenon. Okay, tetugmenon is a perfect participle, meaning well built. And a bomos is an altar, right? So he was wondering whether he should sit by the well-built altar of Dios Megalou, right, of great Zeus. Okay, Dios is the genitive of Zeus. And Zeus here is given an epithet, which is her keu, which means of the courtyard. So in other words, Zeus, as he is worshipped in a sort of courtyard, at a courtyard altar. And, you know, so the Greeks liked giving these epithets or nicknames to the gods, depending on, you know, where they were being worshipped or in what capacity they were being worshipped. Is Zeus being worshipped in his capacity as god of the weather, for instance, or is he being worshipped in his capacity as god of guests? Right, it's that kind of thing, right? They like these different epithets or capacities in which gods can be called upon, or with which gods can be called upon. So he was wondering whether he should sit by the well-built altar of great Zeus of the court, where Entha, and then I'm going to ignore Ara here, where Laertes Odysseus te, right? So Laertes and Odysseus. Remember, Laertes is Odysseus' father. Where Laertes and Odysseus had burnt ekean, right? From the verb kaio, to burn. Put that in here. The verb is sorry, I need to change the alphabet. The verb is kaio there. Also quite a common verb in ancient Greek. Okay, so where Odysseus and Laertes had burned, and in fact, this is, okay, it's a little bit complicated here actually. This is an example of a sort of linguistic usage that we call tmesis. And this is where you take a verb which is normally compound and you split it in two. Okay, so what Homer has done is he's taken the verb epikaio, which is to burn, it's the same as kaio, but he's split it, he's separated the epi and the kaio, right? So the epi is over here, and then the kaio bit is over here. Right, so he separated the two, but really the meaning functions as if these were just one word. So where you see epi and then ekean, really that's just like ekean, right? If you put these together, what you would get is so ekean, right? And Homer's just split them in two, and that's something you get in the Iliad and the Odyssey quite often. Okay, but you don't need to worry too much about that. So where Laertes and Odysseus had burnt epi ekean, and then the object is polla meria, right? Meria means thighs. So many thighs of cows, bo'on. You could say of oxen, genitive plural. So in other words, you know, should Phemius is wondering, should he just sit at this altar of Zeus and pray that Zeus helps him, or whether, having rushed forwards, pros aixas, and remember these two dots above the iota tell you that that's a separate syllable. So the word pros aixas is actually 4 syllables. And it's an aorist participle, right? So having rushed forwards, he should lysoita, he should beg. And again, this is optative because he's considering an option rather than describing a fact, whether he should beg Odysseus, Odyssea, literally of his knees, gounon is genitive plural, we would say something like by his knees. In other words, you know, so Phemius is considering 2 options. Option 1, just sit next to Zeus's altar and pray that Zeus will protect him. Option 2, rush over to Odysseus, grab his knees in a gesture of begging or supplication, and hope that Odysseus spares him, allows him to live. And then Homer tells us what he decides. He says, to him, and in fact I translated der here, der hoi, der means and, hoi means to him, dative case, so and to him, and then phroneonti is a dative participle agreeing with hoi, so to him pondering, or we might say to him as he pondered, it seemed, doasata, it seemed, to be better, einai meaning to be, kerdion meaning better, thus, hode, in this way. Right, it seemed to be better thus, to, and then we hear what he thought was better, to hapsasthai, literally to touch or to clasp, this is an infinitive, which comes from the verb, this is also quite a common verb, which is haptomai, meaning to touch, or eye touch. That's where words like synapse and so on come from. And here we have an infinitive from it, right? So to touch or to clasp, and haptomai takes genitive, so gunon, the knees, of Odysseus, genitive case, Odysseos, so of Odysseus, the son of Laertes, Laertiadeo, and that is another genitive, and it's another patronymic. Now, one thing, I don't want to talk lots about scansion in this video because otherwise it'll become too long. I just want to point out one thing here, which is that these two letters, eo, are actually a diphthong. So they count as one syllable. So, so if we were to scan this line, okay, what we would get is this. Okay, we'd get a spondy first, gunon, and then we get hapsas. Okay, now this one has to be long because the psi counts as a double consonant. This one also has to be long because the A is followed by a double consonant. And here, this one is also a diphthong. Sorry, it's also long because it's a diphthong. And the la of laertiadeo is long as well. And this E here is going to be long because, again, you've got a vowel followed by a double consonant. So tia, short, so that's a spondy. And then this one, as I say, this epsilon omega is actually one consonant, one syllable. So deo, or do, okay, dactyl. And then os, long X. So that gives you the whole line. Gunon hapsasthai laertiadio odysseos. Okay, and with that line, line 339, we will leave it there.